honored guests, Speaker of the House Andrew Romanoff, State Senator John Morse, State Representative Michael Merrifield, Public Trustee Thomas Mao, Harrison School Board District Member Keith Varney, my fellow candidates, my friends and fellow citizens, ladies and gentlemen. The high noon hour of reckoning for House District 17 has now begun. Today, April 12th, I officially launch my campaign as candidate for State Representative, House District 17. More importantly, I would like to invite you to run this historic race with me and see us through a triumphant people's victory until the end. Friends, the winds of change are upon us. The dawning of a new day is before our eyes. Let this be remembered as the year that you helped turn the critical shift in Colorado and stood firm on issues of quality education, creating equitable health care for all, and economic and sustainable opportunities. On behalf of the committee to elect Dennis Apuan, thank you for showing your support to our campaign kickoff, as much as a handful of Democratic rallies and events are taking place today all across town that are masterfully painting a true blue El Paso County. I want to personally thank local residents and volunteers of House District 17 who have shared their hopes and dreams with me, the issues that they care most about, and I also want to acknowledge the women and men who make up the campaign staff, executing in cadence a winning campaign plan with me. Tony Barnes, Interim Campaign Manager and Finance Director. Jane Madden, Treasurer. Ronnie Barnes, Communications Director. Phyllis Lords, Scheduler. And Alice Hines, Volunteer Coordinator. My decision to run for State House is based upon my belief that actions speak louder than words, and my belief that we need aggressive leadership at the Colorado Legislature. This decision is based on feedback given to me by friends and supporters who transcend race, gender, religion, and politics. I am running because these people believe that we need a new direction. We need to establish hope. Not only an audacious hope, but a fervent hope. Hope that tomorrow can bring better than today. Hope that we can control our abundant natural resources in Colorado and the costs for using these resources. Hope that we can educate our children. Hope that we can find jobs for those who want to work. And hope that we can make our streets, communities, and schools safe. I have lived in this House district for the last 11 years, where I have worked in nonprofit management and community organizing. I moved to Colorado Springs in 1997 in true California fashion after a successful sales management career in California. As the bumper sticker says, not a native, but I got here as soon as I can. And I am loving it. I was born and raised in the Philippines, grew up under a repressive administration where you could not even oppose or disagree with the politics or the policies of a dictatorial regime. My family immigrated to the United States in the mid-20s, seeking better opportunities. Soon I found my own voice, and I also found the courage to speak for what I truly believe in. I have organized rallies and demonstrations at schools and town squares, and have fought for fairness, equality, and justice in all my endeavors. I have mentored and empowered others to find their own voice as well. Many in the district feel that they do not have a voice, or that their voices are not being heard. Many feel that they have been neglected and abandoned by the powers that be. Unfortunately, We live at a time where many feel that their elected officials are out of touch with the concerns, ideals, and values of their communities. I invite you to join me in ensuring that House District 17 has the representation that truly reflects the character and needs of our people.
Yes.
Many believe that politicians are more concerned with themselves than they are with people who elected them to public office. The people of House District 17 deserve a new direction. People want to reestablish hope. People want to reestablish a feeling that their state government is there to serve their needs. I will fight for those who are disenfranchised, marginalized, or disadvantaged, ensure that voices of division and exclusion do not dominate the public discourse. I will fight to ensure that the voice of the people consistently impact matters of public policy, and will fight for equal opportunity for all. In a democracy, the future isn't something that just happens. It's something that we shape for ourselves. Ironically, it's sometimes the most idealistic citizens who are the most reluctant to participate in our electoral processes, to try to improve our decidedly imperfect world. But I believe in the words of Mahatma Gandhi, who said, "We must be the change we wish to see in the world." The late Minnesota Senator Paul Wellstone once said, and I quote, "Electoral politics without grassroots community organizing is a politics without a base. Community organizing without electoral politics is marginal politics. And an electoral politics and community organizing without good, sound public policy is a politics without a head," unquote. There is much discussion in our communities about values and public policy. As American citizens, we are called to bring our values to the full spectrum of public policy deliberations and make our voices heard in the public square. We are called to work to end poverty and oppression, as well as to be peacemakers and justice seekers in a broken world in need of healing and reconciliation. We are called to welcome the strangers in our midst, to provide justice for the worker, and to care for the poor in our midst. Friends, speaking truth to power is not free. Yet, it is essential for both our conscience and our world, but it is not free. Rarely have fear and control so threatened to silence the voices of love, compassion, and reason in our communities and in our nation. Never before has the religious right, masquerading as the voice of faith, has had such an easy time of stealing America's jewel,
Amen.
our national conscience. Replacing it with cheap trinkets of moral grandstanding and political double talk.
There you go.
While religious right extremists pour gasoline on a few wedge issues, we believe the vital issues continue to be eradicating poverty, equal access to public education or quality education, healthcare, and economic and sustainable opportunities. Too much is too wrong in this country. We have a foreign policy that is foreign to our core values, and domestic policies that wreak havoc at home. The times are urgent, and we must act. Together, we can restore trust in local government, where elected leaders are in touch with their constituents and attuned to the issues facing the district. I believe that a job should lift someone out of poverty, not keep them there. But in America today, fully 1/4 of all jobs pay poverty-level wages. These jobs are most likely to be held by women and people of color, marginal jobs for marginal people. Poverty jobs that can be changed by life-enhancing jobs if we all work to make this happen. I will support all initiatives to pass living wage laws. I will support efforts that strengthen the right of all workers to form and organize unions. Unions are one of the best ways for workers to improve their wages and working conditions. We are indebted to union struggles of the past for many of the workplace benefits and social supports that we take for granted. Paul Wellstone also said, and I quote, "It is simply negligent to force children to pass a test and expect that the poorest children who face every disadvantage will be able to do so as well as those who have every advantage. When we hold this, we hold children for our inaction and unwillingness to live up to our own promises and obligations." One of the serious problems in No Child Left Behind is that it makes demands on states and school districts without the federal government's meeting its full obligations fully to fund reforms that would build the capacity of schools to close achievement gaps. Public education funding is primarily a state and local responsibility, which means that if the federal government adds requirements and subsequently neglects to pay for them, states and school districts must divert funds to pay for these programs. We must fight to defend and promote affirmative action programs to redress discrimination against people of color and women, and to further the goal that all Coloradans should have equal access to educational and professional opportunities. In our country today, we witness a healthcare delivery system that distributes services unjustly, rations care inequitably, and offers compassion only to those who can pay it. I believe healthcare is a basic right and a moral imperative. Our healthcare system must provide comprehensive, quality, affordable, accessible, and available healthcare for all. I support a health policy which emphasizes universal access, comprehensive benefits, government financing, and reform of health care delivery. There is a balm in Gilead. That's right. And we are the balm that we have been waiting for. Today, not only is global warming with its associated climate change a scientific fact, but so is the crisis that we face this century. The energy we have consumed for more than a century primarily has come from burning fossil fuels. I will support creating programs that include research and development, environmental cleanup, rural utility loans, and funding for energy efficiency and renewable energy programs. We need courageous leadership that will call for an immediate end to the Iraq War and for all the troops. Our service members are seriously facing health consequences due to our government's negligence. Many of our troops have been deployed 2, 3, or even 4 tours of duty, averaging 11 months each. Combat stress, exhaustion, and bearing witness to the horrors of war contribute to post-traumatic stress disorder. The war in Iraq is tearing military families apart, including the use of stop-loss on active duty troops and the unnecessary length and repeat active tours by Guard and Reserve troops. The Iraq War is robbing us of funding so sorely needed here at home. $5.8 billion per month is spent on a war which could have aided the victims of Hurricane Katrina, gone to impoverished schools, the construction of hospitals and healthcare systems, tax city initiatives, and a host of domestic programs that have all been gutted in the wake of the war in Iraq. We need leadership that will demand an end to illegal spying, government corruption, and the subversion of our democracy. We need empowering leadership with a clear vision for a new set of priorities here at home. Together, we can bring real change in Colorado by standing up and standing together for the values that we truly share. Friends, confronting fear with courage has never been easy. Responding to love is rarely unpopular. Speaking on behalf of those whose voices have been silenced has been and always be the noblest of cause. As this campaign proceeds, you will learn more about our grassroots electoral campaign and the issues facing us in this community. Right now, I am asking for your vote by making this announcement of my intention to run and win the District 17 seat. I want you to restore hope in your state government, hope that government serves your needs by making your streets safe, your schools strong, your health good, and your future secure. Today, the citizens of House District 17 are joining together during these coming months to vote, to speak out, and to turn our beautiful state of Colorado around. In just a handful of months, we can show the strength and breadth of the grassroots movement in El Paso County. Voting is how we come together as Americans and as believers in a truly representative state government. Democracy wins when all of us get in gear and participate with enthusiasm and passion and heartfelt commitment. We've got to remember to reach outside our circles of comfort. It's easy to isolate ourselves in like-minded communities and to pay attention only to news sources that confirm our beliefs. In a polarized society like ours today, it can be difficult to remember that we must engage in respectful dialogue and build on our shared values with those who agree with us on some issues. Part of what makes our country great is the beautiful diversity of their citizens and the diversity of our views. But if we do not express our views, we deny our national and local debate the benefit of our experiences and our opinions. We deny ourselves the opportunity to contribute to a better future for everyone. Each generation has a responsibility to make our future better for the next. Every one of us has an individual responsibility to do our part. How we make our contribution to a better future is a personal decision. Now is the time. You are the answer. America is held together by an overwhelming majority of people who share a basic belief in leaving a better world for future generations and who are willing to fight for it if given the opportunity. Thank you for the honor of being your Democratic frontrunner in the race for House District 17 seat, and I trust that you will run this race to victory with me. Another world is possible, a world of peace with justice, a world of fairness and equality, a world of hope and healing. Thank you so much. Over the past 30 years, conservatives have successfully gutted regulation and breached small government while millions of Americans lost good jobs and Wall Street and corporate America made record profits. Wall Street invented new, more complicated ways to make money
off of other people's money. For more than a year now, we have begged and pleaded our political leaders to do something about the rapidly growing mortgage crisis. The conservative response has always been the same: sit on their hands and do nothing while the private market corrects itself. After sitting by idly watching hundreds of thousands of Americans lose their homes due to skyrocketing interest rates, now President Bush and Treasury Secretary Paulson want to plunder the rest of us to pay for the bill for Wall Street's greedy rampage. President Bush wants American taxpayers to bail out the same huge mortgage banks that caused this mess in the first place. He wants the American people to pay twice. It is time to tell our elected leaders in Washington to stop the bailout and pass a recovery plan instead. Now that they have made so much money, they say that the huge Wall Street firms paying grotesque salaries are too big to fail. So a quick fix blank check is making its way through Congress. The Bush-Paulson plan calls for the federal government to buy up $700 billion worth of troubled assets, mainly mortgage-backed securities, with no strings attached. They want the federal government to give financial firms a giant windfall at taxpayers' expense. Apparently, conservatives think that our healthcare crisis isn't big enough to fix, and it wouldn't certainly cost $700 billion. Apparently, the loss of good jobs due to the so-called free trade is not big enough to fix. The disaster from Hurricane Katrina was not big enough to fix, and New Orleans could be left to fail. The looming pension crisis, the affordable housing crisis, the mortgage crisis, none of these apparently deserve a bailout. For conservatives and financial elites, when working people face a crisis, plants close or health care costs triple, the system is working. They take all the private profits, but when the bubble bursts and they can no longer sustain their profiteering rampage, well, they're too big to fail. And who pays the bill? The CEOs are telling Congress to send the bill to the working people, the very same people who have been forced out of their housing, out of their jobs, out of their health care, and out of their pensions by Wall Street's greed. The massive government bailout being proposed for the nation's financial industry will virtually bankrupt our government, making it difficult to pay for other priorities such as health care, education, infrastructure, alternative energy, and tax cuts for the middle class. We oppose the Bush-Paulson bailout proposal because we need to help Main Street before we help Wall Street. Any legislation before Congress must include an economic recovery package to help average American people. Call our U.S. senators and tell them, no bailout for Wall Street. They had their fun. They deserve the hangover. Voice out your opposition to the bailout and remind them that the very people and firms whose reckless behavior, combined with anything goes deregulation and the housing price bubble, created this disaster in the first place. Urge them to take time to develop real recovery plan for our economy that puts people first by addressing foreclosures, jobs, affordable housing, pensions, infrastructure, and healthcare. Reconstruct our financial systems with renewed public oversight to meet the needs of our entire economy, not just for the finance sector, and end the excessive political clout of these few firms. Bring in fair taxation, honoring work over wealth, and stop subsidizing excessive CEO salaries. Strong government action is definitely needed, But the Bush administration's plans are wrong-headed. The proposals to fix Wall Street, like the entirely inadequate foreclosure fix, prop up private profits without helping average Americans or the economy as a whole. It's time for new leadership at all levels of government, federal, state, county, house, district, that put family security first before the securities industry and uses public power and resources to benefit the public interest. As a community organizer and grassroots activist, I have long been an advocate for just, democratic, participatory, and inclusive economic policies. I care deeply about the quality of life in our neighborhood, and I want to make sure that families continue to live, work, and play. Most importantly, I want to make sure that our House district has a voice at the state legislature and that nobody in our community is left behind. We cannot be silent and allow our elected officials to fail those whom they were elected to serve. Millions of working families depend on vital services to survive these difficult economic times. We must press them to ensure that families do not have to make impossible choices between feeding their children, heating their homes, and filling prescriptions in the coming months. We must send an unmistakably clear message in Washington. Main Street before Wall Street. No blank checks to corporate CEOs. We must secure our financial system and protect American families by tightening oversight and regulation of financial institutions, providing a Main Street First package to protect homeowners, limiting CEO compensation, and holding Wall Street executives accountable for the risky decisions that created this whole situation. Finally, while we are helping Wall Street, we must lend a hand to Main Street. Any legislation must include an economic recovery package. This package should include funding for nutrition programs, the emergency food and shelter program, home energy assistance, money for bridges, streets, and levees, aid for states to offset cuts in education and healthcare, an increase in food stamps to address rising food costs, and an extension of unemployment benefits for those who are falling out of the safety net. Friends, these programs do more than just aid families in these difficult times. They have a powerful stimulative effect on our economy. They have the true potential of getting our economy moving by increasing the income of low and moderate income families and by preventing loss of jobs and services. More than ever, we need to elect leaders who know how to respond to the growing needs in our communities, lost jobs, threatened homes, and the surging food and energy prices. Preventing further hardship will not only extend help to millions of people, it will help reverse the economic downturn. Sí se puede. Yes, we can. Buenas tardes, amigos y amigas. Good afternoon, friends. My name is State Representative Dennis Apuan, and it's an honor to be with you here today to celebrate the life and legacy of Cesar Chavez. I represent House District 17, which is southeast Colorado Springs and Fort Carson, and it's made up of communities of color. And as a community, I believe that diversity is our strength. We have a great deal to learn from one another, which enrich ourselves without undermining our identities. Together, listening and responding with openness and respect, we can move forward to work in ways that acknowledge genuine differences, but build on shared hopes and values. I happen to hold with me here a tribute presented by the House of Representatives that reads as follows. The life and work of Cesar Chavez forever changed our nation. Chavez's tireless commitment to social change and economic justice helped forge a stronger community while simultaneously enhancing the quality of life for countless generations to come. His steadfast devotion to nonviolent, respectful dialogue remains a preaching tool for many political leaders, organizers, and citizens across the country seeking to improve their communities. As Chavez once said in his own words, and I quote, "We don't need perfect political systems. We need perfect participation," unquote. Coloradans should try to fulfill Chavez's ideal of direct democracy and work hand in hand to find solutions to our state's most pressing problems. The members of the Colorado House of Representatives are honored to recognize Cesar Chavez and encourage Colorado citizens to heed Chavez's call to action by respecting all human beings, regardless of race and income, and strive to better the lives of all individuals residing in our great state and country. In closing, I would like to share some words by Cesar Chavez. It's actually a prayer for farm workers' struggle, which I think holds true to everyone today. "Show me the suffering of the most miserable, so I will know my people's plight. Enséñame el sufrimiento de los más desafortunados, así conoceré el dolor de mi pueblo. Free me to pray for others, for you are present in every person. Líbrame a orar por los demás, porque estás presente en cada persona. Help me to take responsibility for my own life, so that I can be free at last. Ayúdame a tomar responsabilidad de mi propia vida. Solo así seré libre al fin. Grant me courage to serve others, for in service there is true life. Concédeme valentía para servir al prójimo, porque en la entrega hay vida verdadera. Give me honesty and patience, so that I can work for other workers. Concídame honores y paciencia, para que yo pueda trabajar junto con otros trabajadores. Bring forth song and celebration, so the Spirit will be alive among us. Alumbranos con el canto y la celebración, para que levanten el Espíritu entre nosotros. Let the Spirit flourish and grow, so we will never tire of the struggle. Que el Espíritu florezca y crezca, para que no los cansemos entre la lucha. Let us remember those who have died for justice, for they have given us life. Nos acordamos de los que han caído para la justicia, porque a nosotros han entregado la vida. Help us love even those who hate us, so we can change the world. Ayúdanos a amar aún a los que nos odian, así podremos cambiar el mundo. Thank you very much. Sí se puede. Yes, we can.
With this event, we are seeking to unite and engage the wider community through a multicultural celebration of spoken word performances. I want to acknowledge the people and the organizations who put this together. I want to extend gratitude to the Pikes Peak Library District for hosting this event, the Endowment for the Asian Pacific American Collection of PPLD. I want to give a shout out to the Colorado Springs Diversity Forum, as well as to Citizens Project for being our partners in this endeavor. Cultural diversity brings a collective strength that can benefit our communities and all of humanity, and intercultural dialogue is the best guarantee of a more peaceful, just, and sustainable world. As our communities face profound economic and social challenges,
a historic opportunity to build community radio, offers a valuable resource to unite people, seek solutions, and amplify the voices of those who aren't being heard. The proceeds of tonight's donations will go to the Colorado Media Justice Foundation, specifically to launch a community radio here in Colorado Springs. Seniors and healthcare advocates across the country are celebrating the 44th birthday of Medicare today by lobbying for improvements to the program and expanding quality, affordable healthcare for all. In more than 30 events in 17 states across the country, citizens are honoring Medicare's success and outlining a positive agenda for comprehensive healthcare reform that will help current and future retirees. Dozens of busloads of activists and advocates are in Washington, D.C. right now as we speak, and sending a strong message to Congress and to President Obama that a strong support for an expanded and improved Medicare for all as the already proven great American success story, which has helped reduce senior poverty by 2/3, according to AARP. We must push to expand what we have to get: universal, comprehensive, affordable health care for all. We're celebrating Medicare's 44th birthday today because it is a unique American solution to our healthcare problems. And we're going to take the opportunity to remind our lawmakers of this. Unfortunately, the debate in Congress and much of the delivery of medicine in this nation has been hijacked by the healthcare insurance industry and its army of lobbyists who don't care about patients and only care about maximizing corporate profits, as Rodin pointed out. Only a recommitment to Medicare can change that. Medicare, on its 44th birthday, is remarkably successful. It is one solid rock we have in our disjointed healthcare system. It has successfully provided care to 43 million Americans aged 65 and over, as well as 2 million disabled Americans for almost half a century. It is consistently rated more highly than private insurance firms in terms of reliability and quality of coverage. It provides a comprehensive set of benefits, free choice of providers, and hospitals anywhere in the country, and simplified administration. Its single-payer structure, with only 3% administrative cost, stands in sharp contrast to the 20% and higher wasted by the private insurance companies on administration and profits. In other words, it delivers the opposite of what the private insurance has been providing. And in doing so, it has a better track record of controlling costs. Beginning in 1997, the growth of Medicare's cost per beneficiary has been slower than the cost escalation in coverage provided by private insurers. Between 2002 and 2006, private insurance rose 7.7%, according to MedPAC, an independent agency charged with advising Congress on Medicare issues. Medicare was passed in 1965 after a fierce political debate, even more divisive than the one we're having right now. Those opposed to healthcare reform are saying that a government program will get between you and your doctor. But traditional, unprivatized Medicare shows that to be untrue. Less bureaucracy than that of private insurance industry, with its more than 1,300 insurers working hard to cherry-pick the market for their maximum revenue by denying claims or even canceling coverage. It is very unfortunate that some are seeking to derail the healthcare reform through misleading and divisive attempts to scare seniors. The truth is that several leading proposals in Capitol Hill would actually make it easier for retirees to see a doctor, get a prescription filled, or afford long-term care. It is time for Washington to move beyond these worn-out tactics of divide and conquer, and instead help millions of Americans in need. Despite its successes, Medicare is not a perfect program. It would even be more successful if it were not for the political compromises along the way, allowing it to be privatized. A good example is the Medicare legislation passed in 2003. The problem was the soaring cost of prescription drugs. The result has been a bonanza for the drug and insurance companies. The new drug benefit was handed over to a private sector to manage, and prices have continued to rise unabated, and the government was prohibited from negotiating lower prices as the Veterans Administration does, and new subsidies were offered to private insurers for Medicare Advantage. Not only do retirees have a lot of stake in the healthcare debate, but we also need to worry about our children and grandchildren in these difficult times. If we work together, we can create a healthcare reform plan that helps Americans of all ages. The same forces at work today as healthcare reform proposals make their way to Congress. Under pressure from industry and lobbyists, the public plan has been watered down to a small and ineffectual option at best, if it even ever survives being enacted. But the strengths of traditional Medicare as a system of social insurance coupled with a private delivery system remains the solid foundation upon which to build a better system in this country in terms of access, affordability, quality, efficiency, and reliability. With our economy in an unprecedented downturn, it's vital that we must keep our nation and our great state of Colorado forward and improve our healthcare system. And we must keep pressuring Washington to act on national reforms that focus on controlling costs, because cost of doing nothing is too great, and the burden on families, senior citizens, and businesses is too high. As we celebrate Medicare's 44th birthday today, let us also take pause and celebrate Colorado's many recent health reform accomplishments, including adoption of Colorado Healthcare Affordability Act, which will provide coverage to more than 100,000 uninsured Coloradans and reduce cost shifting and uncompensated care at no additional cost to taxpayers and businesses. The creation of the Center for Improving Value in Healthcare, a public-private partnership that is pursuing long-term strategies to refocus incentives on quality rather than volume. The enactment of loan forgiveness legislation to encourage healthcare providers to work in underserved areas in rural communities. Improved outreach efforts that will provide coverage to 90,000 uninsured but eligible Coloradans through Medicaid and Child Health Plan Plus, which means more cost-effective care and less reliance on expensive emergency room services. As the economy continues to struggle, more and more people are turning to the public safety net programs for care and coverage. That is why, as Colorado State Representative, I am proud to be prime sponsor of House Bill 1004, improving care for seniors by allowing all-inclusive care for the elderly facilities to hire their own physicians to improve care and help seniors live well in their homes. Patients receiving care through PACE are happier and healthier than those living in nursing homes, while saving the state $1,800 a month by merging Medicare and Medicaid dollars. And finally, as we tackle a weakening budget economy and difficult budget choices, we must continue to focus on our goal of expanding the circle of opportunity for all Coloradans. Thank you.
2 million Iraqis are internally displaced, and more than 2 million have fled to neighboring countries, according to the United Nations Commissioner for Refugees. There are an estimated 1.4 million Iraqi refugees in Syria and about 75,000 in Jordan. Within Iraq, the lack of security and fear of killings have affected Iraq's social and economic life. In many places, the population is deprived of clean water and electricity. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. reminded us excuse me, that we are all, quote, caught in an inescapable web of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one affects all indirectly, unquote. All of us are wounded by the war in Iraq, and we must all work together to end it.
Hello everybody, I'm Dennis Apuan, State Representative for House District 17. The only House District that turned from red to blue last year, right here in the heart of El Paso County. As we gather as one united community and one united voice on this Labor Day holiday, it is most fitting indeed to remember the enduring legacy of the late Senator Edward M. Kennedy, who fought for the working class, the poor and disenfranchised, and raised the minimum wage standards, and whose own life cost, affordable health care for all, is what binds us together as one. Let us recommit our unwavering efforts such that the work goes on, the cause endures, the hope still lives, and the dream shall never die. Let us also remember the fighting words of another American who had a dream, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., when he said, and I quote, "Of all forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane," end of quote. And the first step in addressing that inequality is to keep speaking out, something that frankly none of those on our side are doing enough of right now. If those on our side could only hear the words of Dr. King when he said, "Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? But conscience asks the question, is it right?" And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but because conscience tells us that it is right. End of quote. The core problem right now is that about 30% of every healthcare dollar goes to insurance conglomerate and big pharmaceutical overhead and profit, a large part of which represents medical care wrongfully and purposefully denied. If you are looking for so-called death panels, they are in the existing business model in place for the corporate medical insurance industry, where bureaucrats are under the directive to deny as much care as they can get away with. And yet all we hear on cable TV are unrelenting lies and smears about socialism and ration care, as if that language was not old and tired enough already. That is why, as state representative, I support single-payer healthcare, because it is the only solution that provides healthcare for everyone and contains costs while improving quality. This statement is based on undeniable facts. The Lewin analysis done for the 208 Commission demonstrated that only the Colorado Health Services Plan would provide comprehensive health coverage to everyone in Colorado and decrease overall spending. I also remain open to a robust public option on a national level and support the right of states to pursue their own innovative health reform plans. I recognize that it is unlikely that national legislation enacting single-payer financing will be passed in 2009 or 2010. At the same time, People are suffering now due to inability to access health care. As such, I support efforts that will immediately decrease pain and suffering. What single payer does, essentially, is to pool the medical interests of those who need care, and thereby gives them the power to negotiate through whatever is established as the funding agency, favorable and truly competitive pricing from the medical service providers. Government does not take over healthcare. It just takes the responsibility for paying for it. And by eliminating the complicated coverage bureaucracies, it is much more efficient system with low overhead. And that is why it is so mortally opposed by those profiting off our existing, inefficient, uneconomically system right now. I remain hopeful that passage of comprehensive legislation at a national level may be accompanied by passage of legislation that allows state-based innovation in healthcare. The entire so-called debate, such as it is being driven by a tiny handful of loudmouths given oversized coverage in corporate media, from a couple of lunatics disrupting town halls to right-wing reactionaries with giant media megaphones. Yet and still, the only way that they can possibly win is for us not to raise our voices and keep doing so. Speak out! Speak out again and keep speaking out. Don't let the handful of right-wing loudmouths be the only voices out there. There are many more of us on the people's side. If you just have your voice heard, there is no corporate power that can prevail against us. They are depending on your silence to cheat you out of the medical care that you deserve as a citizen of the United States of America. Is this the only first world country where we can put into place good public policy in place? Don't let it happen. Please speak out and enjoin others to do the same. So please involve yourselves in the national debate. Urge your congressional delegates to support Congressman Kucinich's amendment to H.R. 3200, America's Affordable Health Choices Act of 2009, which states that a state may operate a single-payer system. This amendment has bipartisan support. Passage of H.R. 3200 with this amendment would allow Colorado to enact comprehensive health care reform utilizing single-payer financing. Colorado can create and pioneer its own wonderful health system. Oh yes, we can. A uniquely Colorado solution, because healthcare is not just a privilege for the few. Healthcare is a right for everybody. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Apuan, event organizer for our local Candlelight Vigil, Colorado Springs. I am also a former Colorado State Representative and an justice activist. On behalf of the Colorado Media Justice Foundation, which is hosting this event, thank you for being a part of this nationwide effort as we raise our collective voice and implore the government not to use military strike against Syria. This event is part of a National Day of Action being organized by national advocacy organizations including Move On, Credo Action, Progressive Change, and Win Without War. Similar vigils are taking place in over 225 cities across this country tonight. We're here today because as we speak, our nation is on the verge of airstrikes against Syria. If Congress allows to authorize this bombing, we may find ourselves entering a very slippery slope, because what may start as a limited military intervention has the potential to devolve into another war into the Middle East. Aren't 2 wars enough?
Yes!
Though unspeakable atrocities have occurred in the 2-year-long Syrian civil war, that doesn't justify U.S. military intervention, which could lead to more bloodshed. While we unequivocally condemn any use of chemical weapons, along with continued indiscriminate killing of civilians and other violations of international humanitarian law, military airstrikes are not the answer. Rather than bringing an end to the violence that has already cost more than 100,000 lives, they threaten to widen the vicious civil war in Syria and undermine the prospects to de-escalate the conflict and reach a negotiated settlement. The administration continues to say it is not seeking authorization for the war, but in the last week and a half, Secretary of State John Kerry has waffled on whether there would be boots on the ground, and we're now hearing about a no-fly zone and training of rebel forces. As of last week, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee seems to be considering an outright goal of regime change. The risk that this intervention will spiral out of control is precisely why those airstrikes have to be stopped before they begin. It's a huge responsibility and a decision which will have far-reaching consequences. Too many times in the past, members of Congress helped the U.S. rush into war without carefully weighing in all the options and asking necessary questions. What is the exit plan? Will this save civilian lives? How do we define victory? With no clear exit strategy, U.S. military action could have unintended consequences. It could destabilize the situation and worsen the conflict, forcing us deeper into quagmire. These questions and more need answers before Congress votes. We all need to stand up and demand answers. We need to do everything we can to keep us from making the same mistakes that led us to the war in Iraq. We cannot afford another ill-conceived war in the Middle East. Polls have shown that this is not a left or a right issue. The majority of Americans agree with our position. There should be no unilateral military intervention in Syria. On the eve of President Obama's primetime speech about his plans for Syria tomorrow night, we are here to demonstrate that we won't be won by rhetoric. To be clear, we are here tonight holding this vigil to stand firm opposition to launching airstrikes against Syria. But we're also here because we know we can stop this intervention. The air of inevitability being projected by the media and Washington is nothing but hot air. Congress is split on this issue and may even be leaning on our way. That's why we're standing in solidarity tonight, and we'll continue with our calls, our petitions, and every other effort it takes to stop these strikes against Syria. We have confirmed participants guided by their faith and conscience who will be sharing some words of reflection and offering songs for peace later. Now let us take a moment of silence for the lives that have already been lost in Syria and the many more deaths that the U.S. strikes will cause. Let us have a moment of silence. Well, like I said, we haven't really exhausted all means that's possible at our fingertips, and that includes political and humanitarian means. As United States citizens, we need to contact our members of Congress to make sure that we do not get into another slippery slope because our actions may have unintended consequences in the Middle East, and it won't de-escalate the conflict, it'll just worsen the situation.
Would you be for like reciprocal sanctions or any other?
Absolutely. Economic sanctions are also a good way to stop this civil war, which we haven't really tried yet at this point.
I heard you talk about it.
Well, we want to make sure that we have answers to all the questions that we have. We haven't heard anything about an exit strategy. We don't know if civilian lives will be lost because of this, and we do not know how we define victory, so it really spells a quagmire to me. Well, we're going to set a precedent on, international law, and the whole world is watching the United States, and we're just not the police of the world. Way to spend a few hours than to stand with us as we work to protect our heartland, protect our farmers and ranchers, and march against Monsanto. What could be a better civic exercise today than to promote and safeguard our basic human right of access to healthy food? After hundreds and thousands of phone calls and emails by people like you, Congress repealed the Monsanto Protection Act as a direct result of your actions. Today, we gather around the world on the second annual March Against Monsanto. Farmers and activists are celebrating recent victories in Vermont. Attached GMO labeling bill was signed into law by Governor Shumlin. And only a few days ago, farmers and activists in Jackson and Josephine counties in Oregon crushed the GMO seed and chemical giants Monsanto, Syngenta, and Dow Chemical with a ban on GMOs from being planted in their counties. These wins send a clear signal to the biotech industry that their GMO crops are not wanted. And an equally clear signal to politicians that communities will take a stand to protect their democratic right to local home rule. This time, Monsanto's money and lies didn't work. Monsanto and the rest of the gene giants spent a cool $1 million, a new record for a county ballot initiative in Oregon. This time, ordinary citizens and community rights prevailed over corporate and political corruption. Today, we are calling you all to join our global march against Monsanto in an effort to stand up for our democratic rights and protect the planet from Monsanto's toxic influence. We just marched and we are standing to stop the continued corruption of our democracy, the poisoning of our environment, the loss of biodiversity, and the continued assault on the basic rights of farmers and citizens around the world. I am here to share my personal experience about this issue. I went to Colombia, Latin America in 2001 as part of a human rights delegation sponsored by Witness for Peace to investigate the effect of fumigation on the farmers or campesinos where the spraying was taking place. We saw the devastation of the countryside caused by the fumigation and saw the effects of the spray on children and adults in the region. Plan Colombia is reminiscent of Vietnam, and as a result of the United States war on drugs, the aerial spraying of vast sections of the Colombian Amazon jungle with Monsanto's Roundup Ultra in a supposed effort to eradicate coca being grown in the region has been occurring. The effectiveness of the program, however, is greatly in dispute. We heard stories saying that the fragile Amazonian soil could soon be turned into desert. Military planes were targeting coca farms funded by the U.S., and they have been spraying mists of herbicides over food crops, grazing animals, and even children where children were playing.
My brothers and sisters in the struggle, please join me in a moment of silence. Great Spirit of compassion and justice, in our efforts to dismantle racism, we understand that we struggle not merely against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities, those institutions and systems that keep racism alive by perpetuating the lie that some members of the family are inferior and others superior. Spirit of liberty, we live in a nation in which the institution of human bondage was once legal and accepted practice. We give thanks for those who worked and fought at great personal sacrifice to bring about an end to the cruel and oppressive system in our own land. And we pray that governments and authorities everywhere in the world might be led to make a quick end to the enslavement of any human being. As we gather this morning as your beloved community, and in anticipation of the U.S. Supreme Court's decision today on the Muslim ban, grant us by your grace the strength and courage never again to treat as enemies any entire group of persons solely because of the enmity of some members of that group, but to defend and preserve the basic human rights of all people, even in times of distress. Spirit of racial harmony, creator of all people, in our diversity of size, shapes, color, and giftedness, grant us by your grace to recognize the beauty of those of all whom you have made in your own image, Give us gifts of humility and generosity of spirit to recognize all people and practice the commandment to love one another. Create in us a new mind and heart that will enable us to see our brothers and sisters in the faces of those divided by racial categories. Grant us gift of grace and strength to rid ourselves of racial stereotypes that oppress some of us while providing entitlements for others. Help us to create a beloved community that embraces the hopes and fears of oppressed people of color where we live, as well as those around the world. Amen. I'm going to share a meditation for families being separated at our border and those entangled in violence. For the past and violent zone that made land unlivable, societies unstable, and economies unsustainable, may we confess and repair. The exploitation of people and extraction of resources by force, by violence, and by ecological destruction. Spirit, have mercy, and unite us in justice and repair. For the trade policies and privatization of resources that legalized the displacement of indigenous people and brought ruin to farmers and communities, especially in Latin America. Spirit, have mercy and unite us in justice and repair. For military violence in sovereign nations and the manipulation of governments, guerrilla groups, and whatever else serve the U.S. nation state at the expense of peace and security of our neighbors. Spirit, have mercy and unite us in justice and repair. For the present suffering and the assault on the image of God, the humanity of every person, may we repent and rise up. For the children suffering the trauma of separation, who will struggle with attachment and trauma for their whole lives because of their inhuman detainment. Spirit, may we repent and rise up. For the parents and adults who have died by suicide, who are contemplating suicide, who are being killed by medical negligence, who will suffer with trauma and PTSD because of the inhumanity of family separation and the denial of legal asylum claims, whose bodies manifest the anxiety of being detained and isolated, having nowhere to turn and no one to help. Spirit, may we repent and rise up. For LGBTQ persons who are not being adequately recognized, cared, or protected. For the mother whose breasts grow hard, painful with milk, because her nursing child was ripped from her arms. Spirit, have mercy, may we repent and rise up. For the systems we have built and maintained that make violence more efficient, let us make a stand, risk our own bodies, and disrupt in the name of justice and love. Toward the politicians and lawmakers who make lies and propagate racism and fear, and their colleagues who are too cowardly to stand up for justice and truth. Let us make a stand, risk our own bodies, and disrupt in the name of justice and love. Toward the media propagating polemic oversimplifications and diminishing the stories and humanity of people, or who are using power for profit and destruction, rather than truth and transparency. Let us make a stand and risk our bodies and disrupt in the name of justice and love. Toward the business leaders who are profiting on violence, racism, incarceration, and the unlawful detention and separation of families by building detention centers and bidding on government contracts tied to this inhumanity and violence. Let us make a stand, risk our bodies, and disrupt in the name of justice and love. for the future should only be full of life and justice. We are bold and courageous enough to demand. Take it together now. Go with us, spirit is strong. If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us help each other. Then let us work together. I welcome you all to our candlelight call to action in honor of Sandra Bland. My name is Dennis Apuan, and I am here on behalf of the National Federation of Filipino-American Associations, where I serve as the National Deputy Director for Advocacy. There is an Asian American activist who said these words, and I quote from Sonia Joan, and it goes, Asian Americans often end up somewhere in the chasm between blackness and whiteness, whether pushed there, largely invisible and struggling to dodge the crossfire, or diving in to eagerly reap the rewards of non-blackness. Our options are invisibility, complicity, or resistance. And Black Rage is a clarion call for standing on the correct side of the color line, for reaping the collective rewards of justice. I choose resistance. End of quote. Hey. 2 weeks ago, on July 10th, Sandra Bland was pulled over by the police for failing to signal while making a lane change. What followed has become an all too common scene and illustrates the ever-increasing rise in domestic terrorism in the U.S. Tonight, we are joined by community leaders, local leaders who are pulling together during this difficult time to speak out against the discriminatory policing practices that led to her death. Indeed, our wider Colorado Springs community, when at its best, brings diverse peoples together to reflect on important concerns of the day and then act to make things right. Our candlelight call to action in honor of Sandra Bland is one of those urgent, critical moments when the witness of the people needs to be seen, heard, and felt. On behalf of my fellow co-organizers, Rosemary Harris and Dana Saliki, speakers, singers, and all you folks gathered here, we welcome you this evening as we say her name, because Black Lives Matter, and because our own self-liberation is bound up with each other. Sandra Bland's death over a routine traffic stop is beyond monstrous. It is indicative of a country where extreme violence is the norm, a society fed by the legacy of slavery, Jim Crow, the incarceration state, the drug wars, and the increasing militarization of everything, including the war on black youth. There is more at stake here than the fact that, as federal statistics indicate, the police are 31% more likely to pull over a black driver than a white driver. Routine traffic stops for black drivers contain the real possibility of turning deadly. This regular violence propels a deeply racist and militarized society. It is a violence that turns on young people and adults alike who are considered disposable. This type of harassment is integral to a form of domestic terrorism in which black people are routinely beaten, arrested, incarcerated, and too often killed. This is the new totalitarianism, boot-in-your-face racism, one in which the punishing state is the central institution for controlling poor people of color and enforcing the rules of the financial elite. How much longer can this war go on? The United States has become a country that is proud of what it should be ashamed of. How else can you explain the popularity of the racist and bigot Donald Trump? We celebrate violence in the name of security and violate every precept of human justice through an appeal to fear. This speaks clearly to a form of political repression and a toxic value system. Markets and power are immune to justice and despise it. This reminds me of a quote from Blaise Pascal, who once said, and I quote, "Justice and power must be brought together so that the just may be powerful and whatever is powerful may be just," unquote. How many more black men, women, and young people will join the list of those whose deaths have sparked widespread protests? We lament and abide with the communities of Trayvon Martin in Sanford, Florida, Ayanna Jones in Detroit, Michigan, Eric Garner in Staten Island, New York, Yvette Smith in Bastrop, Texas, Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, Katherine Johnson in Atlanta, Georgia, Tamir Rice in Cleveland, Ohio, Freddie Gray in Baltimore, Maryland, Renisha McBride in Dearborn Heights, Michigan, Sakia Gunn in Newark, New Jersey, and now Sandra Bland in Hempstead, New Texas, those who died at the hands of the police. We lament and abide with the communities of slain officers Rafael Ramos and Wenjian Liu of New York. We lament the reality that Black and Latino police officers on their off-duty time are susceptible to the same over-policing and discrimination that communities of color suffer. We seek healing too, but recognize that wounds not fully cleansed will not heal properly. Police violence in the United States is not only a direct manifestation of state violence, but also serves as a gateway to prison, especially for people of color and the poor. In a country in which militarism is viewed as an ideal and the police and soldiers are treated like heroes, violence becomes the primary modality for solving problems. One consequence is that state violence is either ignored, rendered trivial, or shamelessly legitimated in the name of a few, in the name of the law, security, or self-defense. As Henry Giraud put it, state violence fueled by the merging of a war on terror, the militarization of all aspects of society, and a deep-seated, ruthless, and unapologetic racism is now ubiquitous and should be labeled as a form of domestic violence. Terrorism, torture, and state violence are no longer simply part of our history. They have become the nervous system of an increasingly authoritarian state. Eric Gardner told the police that he was being choked to death and he could not breathe. These words also apply to democracy itself, which is lacking in civic oxygen that gives life. The United States is a place where democracy cannot breathe. Efforts to hold individual police officers and police departments accountable must not be construed as anti-police. Law enforcement officers have every right to expect respect from community members when they are performing their jobs with integrity and accountability. However, communities, and especially communities that have a long experience of racial injustice, at the hands of the police and within the justice system have every right to expect government to hold law enforcement and public safety departments accountable for every action when individual officers abuse the power entrusted to them and when there is clear evidence of racial bias and profiling. The form that the war on terror has taken on at home is a war on poor people of color, especially black people. Racism and police militarization have created a new kind of terrorism, one in which extreme violence is being used against black people for the most trivial infractions. The killing of black youth by the police, a norm that stretches back in an unbroken line of terror to slavery, takes the form of both routine affair and spectacle. The roots of the issues go far deeper than we want to admit. Therefore, it is important to revisit American history in an effort to understand our current reality in an appropriate context. Our history is that of enslavement of people of African descent and the annihilation of native peoples of the land. It includes decades of state-sanctioned segregation and lynching. These are among the realities that shape our present. Although slavery, genocide against Native Americans, mob-initiated lynching, and segregation have ended, we cannot ignore their lasting impact on present attitudes and behaviors regarding race. Nor can we ignore the disproportionately high rates of incarceration of men and women of color. It is important to understand that racism as we face today, while daunting and seemingly intractable, is not the racism Americans of all races faced decades ago. Our understanding of racism is more than a black and white issue, has deepened, and now we are able to see racism as also institutional and systemic. We have been reawakened by the disturbing differences in perception about how law enforcement functions in various communities. Dr. Martin Luther King's dream of a beloved community has not yet been realized, but it can be if we set our sights towards building relationships, seeking redemption, and working for the reconciliation of our differences. Thank you.
Hear these words from Chief Seattle, and I quote, "You must teach your children that the ground beneath their feet is the ashes of our grandfathers, so that they will respect the land. Tell your children that the earth is rich with the lives of our kin. Teach your children that we have taught our children that our earth is our mother. Whatever befalls the earth, befalls the sons of the earth. If men spit on the ground, they spit upon themselves. This we know. The earth does not belong to man. Man belongs to the earth. This we know. All things are connected like the blood which unites one family. All things are connected." End of quote. We come together at a time when the earth is being ravaged and the animals are dying, and we are a new tribe of people, and by our actions and deeds shall make the earth green again. You all are my beloved community, and I give thanks for your tireless work. 8 days ago on January 21, we bore witness to the largest mobilization of peaceful resistance in Colorado Springs history. Arguably between 7,000 to 10,000 Southern Coloradans marched on whose streets?
Our streets!
Whose streets?
Our streets!
To express our concern about the new administration's agenda, including climate change. CSCJ organized the first 100 hours climate justice vigil in Colorado Springs, one of over 140 plus vigils organized by People's Climate Movement to lift up Mother Earth and a sustainable future for our children. It was encouraging to see so many people to speak out and be vigilant about the dangerous agenda of this new administration. Already last week, Donald Trump has signed executive orders to approve the controversial Keystone XL and DAPL and to freeze EPA grants that are critical for water quality, climate resilience, and toxic waste cleanup. Meanwhile, there appears to be no evidence that Trump has actually sold off his shares in Energy Transfer Partners, which owns the Dakota Access Pipeline. We will resist this kind of deplorable action. 2006 was the warmest year in recorded history. This is not the time to move our country backwards by investing in fossil fuel infrastructure that will emit 1.3 billion tons of carbon during its lifetime. The challenges presented by a Trump administration are extraordinary, but we have faced big battles before. Together, we must lift our voices to put health and safety of the American people first, not the financial interests of big oil. We must all work in defense of climate progress. We must lobby, write, and pressure U.S. Senators Michael Bennet and Cory Gardner and Congressman Doug Lambert to protect our hard-won climate policies and block environmental roadblocks. We must be on the offense for new climate protections at state and local levels and support strong laws that curb global warming that are passing 100% renewable energy ordinances.
Water is life! 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 Water is life!
Water is life! Water is life! Water is life!
This way is better. Protest at school.
Finally, we must build and sustain our movement everywhere by mobilizing tens and thousands more to get involved, take action, and speak out.
People, the planet, and peace over profit! People, the planet, and peace over profit!
People, planet, and peace over profit!
your calendars now. The Colorado Springs Council for Justice is mobilizing on Saturday, April the 29th for the People's March on Jobs, Justice, and the Climate, bookending 100 days of resistance. And his team continue to dismiss the urgency of climate change and deny scientific consensus with alternative facts. His picks for EPA, the Departments of Energy, State, and Interior indicate a determination to undermine our critical investments in clean energy and protection for public lands, air, and water quality.
But today we are actually celebrating World Day of Social Justice. It's a day recognizing the need to promote efforts to tackle issues such as poverty, exclusion, and unemployment. It was passed by the United Nations General Assembly in 2007, and member countries of the United Nations have been celebrating it since 2009. As recognized by the World Summit, social development aims at social justice, solidarity, harmony, and equality within and among countries. And social justice, equality, and equity constitute the fundamental values of our society. An executive order banning refugees, referring Christians, and casting the Muslims as a terror threat, appointments of people to key positions who have strong ties to white supremacist organizations, a historic and blatant disregard for ethics and conflict of interest, public humiliation of women and people with disabilities, and public speech from the highest office in the land designed to cast doubt and aspersions on the integrity of our judicial system. These all conspire to make engaged citizens committed to a just world for all feel beleaguered, battered, and weary. When an executive order is written that closes borders to 7 countries, we cannot fail to respond when the President brags about his history of sexually assaulting women who, by his own words, want to do it because of his celebrity. We cannot not speak out when religious freedom is threatened as a means of discrimination against women who exercise their reproductive choice options, or to protect bigots and homophobes who don't want to hire or sell to LGBT folk. These matters and more, we will respond, react, and speak out. When injustice becomes a law, resistance becomes a duty. Resist! 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 Let us not fight violence or vitriol, but challenge the cultures and institutions that promote hate. Let us practice the dignity and care in our homes that we want for all of us. Let us protect our capacity for joy. Let us nurture our bodies and spirits. Let us rise and dance. Let us honor our mothers and ancestors, whose bodies, breath, and blood call us all to a life of courage. In their name, we choose to see this darkness not as a darkness of the tomb, but of the womb. Let us breathe and push through the pain of this era to birth a new future. Together, let us all declare that love is the call of our times. May your day be reflective and renewing as we stand for social justice for all. Thank you all. My name is Dennis Apuan, and I welcome you all to our rally this afternoon. Right now, our free and open internet is under attack. President Trump's FCC chairman, Ajit Pai, a former Verizon lawyer, announced plans in April to undo net neutrality rules. This would change the internet as we know it. But we have the opportunity to protect our speech and privacy on the internet and tell the FCC and big cable like AT&T, Comcast, and Verizon to back off. Donald Trump's attack on our civil liberties continues, and now your access to the internet is being threatened. 30 years ago, the internet was primarily a tool used by the government. Today, it has become a staple for all Americans. Unfortunately, Ajit Pai, Trump's appointed chair of the FCC, is preparing to allow large cable companies to restrict our use of the internet while charging us extra fees. It is easy for us to think of the internet as a tool for social media, finding recipes, and sharing cute animal photos with our friends. But it's much more than that. The internet is the reason our children are more culturally aware than their parents. It facilitates learning and new advancement by everyday people and promotes social activism among communities that have never had the ability to have their voices heard. Donald Trump and Ajit Pai both know the power of the internet holds when it comes to organizing. This is what scares them so much. The amount of organizing and activism against them that has erupted online is a dire threat to Trump's administration, so they want to put an end to it. That's why a huge coalition of progressive organizations are joining forces to fight the rollback of net neutrality. Today, we are making calls to Congress, urging them to take a stand against the FCC chair, protect free speech, and keep the internet open for everyone. Communication is the bedrock that enables us to push for social justice everywhere. We will not let President Trump's appointee overturn net neutrality protections. In this crucial time, we need net neutrality more than ever and defend the future of our democracy. Our marches, vigils, petitions, and calls to action depend on organizing an open internet. The open internet is a space where all of us, no matter the content of our beliefs, the color of our skin, or the size of our wallets, have an equal voice. A threat to net neutrality is a threat to the free exchange of ideas that creative culture and an informed public rely on. Furthermore, communities of color across the United States depend on an open internet to thrive. From resisting police violence to demanding fair wages, the political voice and economic opportunity that the internet enables must remain protected by Title II of net neutrality. Trump's FCC seeks to wall these communities off from the power of the internet as a mobilizing tool and an equalizer. We stand together with activists, communities of color, advocacy groups, tech companies to preserve democracy by defending the internet. Protecting the internet can be a tricky concept to grasp. The internet itself is not going away. It's the ability to access the internet that the Trump administration wants to restrict. This will leave social justice organizations open to discrimination by both the FCC and big businesses that are negatively impacted by their activism. Many more depend on the web to communicate and bring together members from all across our communities and the country, putting an end to their ability to openly express or to openly access the internet is an underhanded attack on our communities. The fight for net neutrality was a long, hard battle that we won before. We can win again. Thank you for stepping up today to protect the free and open internet. And I want to thank our speakers for having your voices heard. Thank you all for coming.